Look at a standard world map. You might assume we have the entire planet figured out. In reality, massive sections of the Earth's surface remain completely hidden from our view, blacked out by impenetrable environmental shields. For centuries, the scientific consensus treated the Amazon rainforest as the ultimate green shield, assuming it was a pristine, untouched wilderness capable of supporting complex human societies. Modern researchers are flying airplanes over the canopy, firing infrared laser pulses down at the surface. This technology, called LiDAR, maps the exact contours of the ground below by ignoring the dense foliage, finally exposing what sits underneath. Those lasers are hitting the remains of sprawling pre-Columbian megacities, complete with massive pyramids, defensive moats, and elevated causeways. These dense populations sustained themselves using terra preta, a rich, man-made black dirt created by mixing charcoal, bones, and compost into the normally sterile jungle soil. The Amazon we see today is an overgrown post-apocalyptic landscape, a vast terrain that reclaimed a highly developed fallen civilization after outside diseases decimated the indigenous population. The isolating effect of dense jungle is even more extreme in the mountainous rainforests of New Guinea. The geography there is so harsh and fractured that isolated indigenous tribes can live miles apart without ever knowing their neighbors exist. Because the terrain limits human expansion, biologists are still routinely discovering massive, previously unknown mammals here, like a fluffy 2.5-foot-long woolly rat photographed for the very first time in the wild just a few years ago. If a creature that large can remain totally hidden from modern science until the 2020s, it raises the possibility that famous predators declared wiped out decades ago might still be roaming the deep interior. The prime candidate is the thylacine, or Tasmanian tiger. As we see in this archival photograph, it was a large, distinctively dog-like carnivorous marsupial. Because it once hunted all across the ancient land bridge connecting Australia to New Guinea, the dense highland jungles could easily be concealing a surviving population. And if a green canopy of leaves can hide entire lost cities and massive extinct predators, consider what might be buried under 3 vertical miles of solid ice. Antarctica is covered by a white shield. The ice sheet is so incomprehensibly thick that researchers widely accept we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the actual landmass of our own southernmost continent. This vector graphic illustrates the sheer scale of what we are starting to find beneath the ice. When compared against the Grand Canyon in the United States, the newly discovered Denman Glacier Canyon plunges to a staggering depth of 3.5 kilometers, making it the deepest canyon on Earth's exposed land. Looking at a radar-style map of the continent's eastern half, we see another massive anomaly. Satellites detected a region where the gravitational pull is noticeably weaker, pointing to a circular impact zone buried under the ice that measures nearly 300 miles wide, likely the crater of a colossal asteroid strike. The ice sheet is acting as a planetary time capsule, perfectly preserving the evidence of violent, extreme geological events that shaped the Earth millions of years ago. Even in this frozen landscape, intense geothermal heat pushes back against the ice. This image of Mount Erebus shows a distinct steam plume rising from the snow-covered peak, proving that active volcanoes are currently venting heat into the atmosphere. That volcanic steam carves out vast networks of subglacial ice caves, where the temperature hovers around a comfortable 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Soil samples taken from these caves contain unidentified DNA traces, pointing to unknown species of arthropods thriving in the warmth. Further inland, the heat maintains massive bodies of liquid water, like Lake Vostok. It holds more volume than Lake Michigan and has been entirely sealed in absolute darkness beneath the ice sheet for 15 million years. When researchers melted a small hole through a similar glacier in West Antarctica and lowered a camera down into the pitch black, they expected a sterile void. Instead, they found hundreds of swarming shrimp-like amphipods actively swimming in the dark. The fact that complex ecosystems can thrive in total darkness beneath miles of crushing ice proves that the boundaries we set for biology are far too narrow. Discovering lost cities and subglacial life expands our scientific understanding. But as global temperatures rise and these environmental shields begin to melt, the newly exposed land will trigger a severe geopolitical conflict. 2/3 of Greenland sits above the Arctic Circle, and its melting ice sheet is shedding 200 billion metric tons of water a year. As the bedrock is exposed, nations are realizing what is actually sitting on the surface. This bar chart breaks down the global supply of rare earth elements, the critical materials required to manufacture smartphones, electric vehicles, and advanced fighter jets. China currently holds an overwhelming monopoly on these resources. But as that new bar sliding into the frame shows, Greenland's newly exposed terrain holds projected reserves so massive they rival the entire Chinese supply. The retreat of the White Shield is shifting the balance of global technological and military power, turning an overlooked frozen island into a high-stakes strategic prize. The situation is even more volatile at the bottom of the world. In the Weddell Sea off the coast of Antarctica, a Russian research ship recently mapped a deposit that dwarfs almost every other energy reserve on the planet. This volumetric diagram reveals the true scale of that discovery. The smaller cube represents the total oil output of the entire North Sea over the last 50 years. The towering cube next to it represents the estimated 511 billion barrels of oil sitting untouched beneath the Antarctic ice. Currently, the only barrier preventing nations from hauling in offshore drilling rigs to extract this staggering wealth is the 1959 Antarctic Treaty, an international agreement that strictly forbids any mining or drilling on the continent. But proximity to Antarctica has historically driven nations to violence. The Falkland Islands are British sticker on this military pact is a direct artifact of the intense, real-world warfare that erupted between Argentina and the UK over nearby territorial claims. The Antarctic Treaty is up for formal review in the year 2048. By that time, thinning ice cover will make navigating and drilling in the Weddell Sea significantly cheaper and easier. The warming climate is pulling back the curtain on the planet's greatest historical and biological mysteries. But by stripping away these environmental shields, we are exposing buried resources that could ignite the next massive global conflict.